Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Sunshine Coast Regional District Committee of the Whole meeting for Thursday, October 12th. It's 9:32, and I would like to call this meeting to order and acknowledge that the SCRD is located on the traditional territories of the Sechelt and Squamish Nations. We have an agenda in front of us today. Directors, are there any amendments to the agenda? If not, I look for a motion to adopt as presented. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. First up, we have a delegation from the Sunshine Coast Labour Council regarding a living wage municipality. So with that, we will turn it over to you guys.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Miyuki Shinkai. I'm of Sunshine Coast Labour Council's president. Thank you for having us in the delegation. Really appreciate your time. A little bit about the Sunshine Coast Labour Council. We are chartered by Canadian Labour Congress and affiliated with BC Federation of Labour. We have 13 labour unions affiliates on the Sunshine Coast, representing hundreds of frontline workers in education, trades, transportation, healthcare, and the public offices and the infrastructure such as yours, SCRD. So here we are concerning about our living wage on the coast being one of the highest in BC, $24.30 per hour from last year's study. So 2022, Sunshine Coast Foundation released these studies, and it's really reflecting rising cost of living, food and shelters, particularly one of the hardest part in that in the province. So here I am asking SCRD to consider adopting living wage policy to pay forward to our community, such as recruitment and retention of workers on the Sunshine Coast, and board to consider doing some research, pass a motion to direct staff to study the paying forward to our community by becoming a living wage employer. So I am introducing my team member here, Anastasia French from Van City, Living Wage for Families BC, to present. She's a provincial manager, by the way, present living wage municipalities presentation. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you, Mayuki, for that introduction. So I'm Anastasia. I am the Provincial Manager for Living Wage for Families BC. So I work with community groups across the province to help calculate the living wage and then advocate for both employers to pay their staff and contracted workers a living wage, and also to look at what we can do to help make life more affordable for workers, because hopefully one day that stops the living wage rising at the rate that it is. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Wonderful. So I'm going to just start by saying, what is the living wage, just for those that don't know. So and the living wage versus the minimum wage. So the minimum wage is the legal minimum you must pay your workers. And at the moment across BC, that is $16.75 an hour. Whereas actually at Living Wage for Families BC, we partner with community groups, including the Sunshine Coast Foundation, to actually calculate what it actually costs to be able to live. And you can see on that map the different living wage rates from across the province. And as Mayuki said, the Sunshine Coast has one of the highest living wages in the province, and that is $24.30 an hour at the moment. And the reason that it's higher than a lot of other places is really because of housing and how expensive housing is on the Sunshine Coast, and also how expensive food is. They're the two biggest costs in a family budget. On the left-hand side, you can see some of the costs that go into the budget. And I really want to stress that the living wage is really a bare minimum, bare essential budget. It's the cost of essentials like food, childcare, housing. It doesn't include things like savings for retirement, savings for a rainy day, big vacations, or anything like that. It really is how much you can get by just on the bare essentials. So that's the living wage is $24.30 an hour. And what we're here to do is to ask the regional district to look and to scope out whether or not they could become a living wage employer. So a living wage employer commits to paying both their direct staff and their contracted workers a living wage. We have nearly 400 living wage employers across the province, including 10 municipalities. The Sunshine Coast Regional District could become the first regional district in BC to make that commitment, which I think would be really exciting. And below there, you can see some of the logos of some of the local living wage employers. So these are local businesses that have all made the commitment to pay their staff a living wage. And you can see some of these are nonprofits, some of these are construction firms, a real variety of different businesses who have all done the right thing to commit to trying to pay their staff and contracted workers a living wage. And the reason they do that is because paying a living wage is good for workers. And I think we can all know and understand why earning a living wage would be a good thing for a worker. It offers independence and peace of mind. It means they may not have to be working multiple jobs just to make ends meet. They're not going to have to stress. They can focus on the job at hand rather than not having to stress about how they're going to pay for rent or how they're going to pay for food or some kind of emergency that's just come up. They also feel valued and appreciated for the work that they're doing, and they have more time to spend with their families and focus just on the job at hand and enjoy the life they're living. Look how happy those workers are because they're earning a living wage. But it's also good news for businesses. So we surveyed all of our living wage employers last year and we asked them what the benefits were that they found from paying a living wage. And 96% of living wage employers found some kind of benefit from being part of the program. It's helped them live their values. It's helped them, it's provided good publicity for the organization, but it's also made good business sense. It's helped lower staff turnover. It's helped with recruiting staff. We hear loudly and clearly about how we're in the middle of a labour shortage, and I know that's a bit of an issue specifically on the Sunshine Coast at the moment. And actually paying a living wage is one way to kind of help deal with that labour shortage because it helps you stand out amongst other local employers. And it increases staff morale. And it helps also, one thing that we've heard, and this is just what we've heard anecdotally, is it helps set an example with others of kind of the right thing to be done to make sure that workers can earn enough just to be able to make ends meet. So it's good for business. And finally, it's also good for local communities. When children live in poverty or when their parents need to work for multiple jobs just to make ends meet, all of society pays a price, whether that's in additional government support, whether that's in healthcare, education, all of these different things. When kids grow up in poverty, often there's a cycle there where they end up living in poverty themselves. And kids are only living in poverty because of how much their parents are earning. We also know that it's good on a positive side, that when low-income workers receive a pay increase, they're far more likely to spend that money and spend that money locally than when high-wage workers earn a pay increase, who may choose to spend that money and invest it offshore or on a big international vacation. Whereas when low-wage workers get a pay increase, they might treat themselves to a haircut or go for a coffee. And again, that helps small local businesses. So it's a nice cyclical effect there. And there's a nice quote there from Brad West, who's the mayor of Port Coquitlam, on the benefits that they found from adopting this living wage policy. And I'm just going to finally end on the certification process for local governments. So the first thing is just to kind of do a staff report to find out what the impact would be. How much would it cost? How many of your workers and contractors are not currently earning a living wage? We find in other municipalities that a lot of the direct staff are unionised and actually are already earning above a living wage. But where the difference really comes in is for the contractors. So the cleaners, the security guards, those workers who are vital for keeping a place running and functioning, but may not necessarily be earning a living wage to be able to do that vital work. So we're asking you today to pass a motion to prepare a full report on the costs and implications of implementing a living wage policy. And then staff prepare that report, and then that comes back to council to discuss. And then apply to become a living wage employer. And we're happy to answer any questions that staff may have and kind of work with them throughout that process as they kind of navigate some of the additional questions and things that arise. So that's a bit of a whirlwind about living wage because I only had 10 minutes. I hope I didn't speak too fast. I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll open it up for any questions that people may have.
Thank you very much for that presentation. You were so smooth and adept compared to some of the delegations we have. It's obvious you've done this presentation before, so thank you for that. I see a hand up already. Director Bax.
Yeah, question is, when you calculate living wage, is that include benefits and pensions within that calculation?
So it does include benefits. So any additional benefits that you offer, for example, a health and dental plan, additional paid time off, they all will help lower your living wage requirements. So at the moment, with a living wage of $24.30 an hour, it will lower your living wage requirements to about it takes about $2 off if you offer a full health and dental plan. We don't actually include pension contributions, not because they're not valid and they're not fantastic, but because it's we use whatever goes into the living wage, and because we don't include savings for retirement into the living wage, we then don't include it as things to reduce the living wage to the other side, if that makes sense. Now, that's not taking out the value of pensions. I think it's very important, but often when low wage workers, they're looking from paycheck to paycheck and maybe can't afford to think of the future and that money for later. The other thing I forgot to mention, is that we recalculate the living wage every November. So in a month's time, you'll be hearing the new living wage. And we expect from the kind of rough calculations that we've seen so far, I don't want to give away too much, but we're seeing that housing costs and food costs are continuing to go up. They're continuing to skyrocket. The other side of it, though, is that government investments recently in childcare are offsetting some of those costs. So that will help kind of affect some of the kind of cost increases that we're seeing with food and with housing.
Thank you for that. And you said that next calculation is being published in November?
Yeah, November the 8th.
Okay, so just less than a month away. Great. Director Stanford.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, out of interest, how is this organization funded?
So we're funded kind of 3 different ways. Vancity Credit Union are one of our biggest financial supporters at the moment. Living wage employers also pay fees, a small fee. So an organization, it depends on the size of the organization and whether they're for profit or not for profit, but between around $200 a year each employer pays. And then also additional voluntary contributions from different organizations who support us. And we apply for grants and other kind of things like that. We're a program of Vancity Community Foundation, who run all sorts of programs across the province, including the BC Rent Bank as well.
Thank you. Director Inkster.
Thank you. Thanks for reaffirming the information regarding the Sunshine Coast and the high living wage and its direct reference to housing up here. It's a good reminder to us continuously of that challenge to people. I wanted to ask you about a couple of pieces of information you put in your presentation. One is the proportionality of spending by those that earn a lower wage, if you could say a little more about that, and the shop local piece that you were referencing. I'm assuming it's because they don't travel as much with less money to travel, but if you could speak to a couple of those, that's helpful to me. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that was research that was done by Goldman Sachs, and it was looking particularly at the living wage campaign in the UK, because that campaign that's been running for about 10, 15 years, and they've had a lot more ability to do detailed research. But what they found was when low wage workers get a pay increase, they're far more likely to spend that money because they have it to hand, and they want to treat themselves, but they can only really afford to treat themselves in kind of small ways, like going for a haircut or getting a coffee or treating themselves for a nice meal out in a local restaurant, rather than necessarily when high wage workers get a pay increase because they have more money, they can maybe use it to spend on an international vacation, or they may invest it, or there's lots of different ways where people choose to spend money. But when you have less money, you probably are more likely to spend it closer to home than when you have more money, which you might use to splash out on something bigger.
Great. Thank you for that. Directors, any other questions or comments? Director Stanford.
This is just a question to staff, because I think we had a rough estimate a few meetings ago. Is there a rough idea of how many of our staff are below the living wage? I seem to remember hearing a stat of some kind.
Good morning, Senior Manager Parker. You'll have to pull the microphone a little closer. These new ones are less sensitive.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question. In preparing for the information you were reviewing today, I did take a look at all of our classifications. We currently only have 2 classifications. One's called arena worker, one's called recreation clerk. They both pay currently $22.91 an hour. It was good to hear about the benefit considerations, because what I heard was if you roughly added $2 an hour, those would both be higher than the current living wage. We are in bargaining right now, but right now I'll just say we have 6 employees who are casual employees working as arena workers. They work roughly 2 to 4 hour shifts. It's generally targeted at high school students or people that would go skating in the arenas and help out there. And we have 3 full-time, 3 part-time, and 4 casual recreation clerks. So that's every other position that we have within the organization is higher. I do not have information on contractors, but that's the state of how things are for staff. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
I can't resist pointing out that directors are not paid a minimum wage. But I just wanted to say that I find it a little confusing, and I was just wondering, you express the living wage as an hourly rate, but like all of census figures and everything are in annual income, which is a little hard to translate. And do we have any idea what percentage of the workers on the Sunshine Coast are making less than a minimum living wage? Thank you.
Oh, that's a good, in terms of the Sunshine Coast census average, that's a really good question that I don't have to hand, but I can go and find that out because that's a really great question. In terms of the annual amount, it works out to be around, I think it's about 43,000 a year. Let me just, I can check that and let you know. Yeah, around 44,000 a year.
Okay, thank you. Director Inkster.
Thank you. A number of years ago, this organization came to speak to the district. I think the living wage at that time was 21, and I'm thinking we supported, I'm not sure if, I think we supported it with the district, but as Mr. Parker said, the change tends to be within recreational services, or the lower amount. The District of Sechelt, I would say, maybe we have one or two cases, maybe at greeting when you come into the district where the wage is maybe near that, but I think it's a little higher. But when we moved over the recreational piece to the regional district, we would have had a number of those positions back then that would have probably still qualified now as under the amount. So it's interesting how that recreational piece would have brought the district, had a number of workers, probably 6 to 8 back then, that were below the living wage. Now we don't have them because recreation is now with the regional district. So
I believe that's called passing the buck.
yeah, well, that was part of the referendum, but that's an indication, Chair, of where it is.
We find quite often it's the recreational workers who are the ones that, it's the contractors, and that's sometimes where cleaners, depending on if it's done in-house or not in-house, but but it is often the recreational workers and the casual workers who are not earning a living wage. Also because the casual workers and the part-time recreational workers may not get benefits, and so then you're looking at 24.30 to be paying them rather than the 22 or whatever the benefits works out to be.
Thank you. Director Bax?
Yeah, I wanted to get some more clear information from staff about the amount of FTEs, full-time employees, that are below this threshold of 2430. Do you have you were giving me numbers for part-time and full-time, but I just didn't quite catch it all.
Senior Manager Parker.
Yeah, thank you for the question. We have 3 full-time staff, 3 part-time staff, and 10 casual staff, currently earning $22.91 an hour. We have about 240 FTE, so that would equate to about 5.5 FTEs. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any other hands up. It's not our standard practice to make motions on delegation materials, but given that we are going into bargaining and, we're now all a little more educated on the subject, it'll be interesting to see how this moves forward. So thank you for your presentation today.
Thank you very much for having us, and thank you to Chair and the board, and have a nice meeting today. Bye for now.
Bye for now.
Thank you. And if anyone has got any additional questions, reach out at any time.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. All right, next up on our agenda is the water supply update, item 3. But before we do that, I've just been reminded that I missed my motion to receive the delegation materials as well as the reports and minutes. So if I could have a motion, moved, seconded, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Now we can actually discuss the business of the meeting. So with that, I see our GMs and our superintendent in the room, so I don't know who's giving us the water update. Superintendent Abbott, apparently it's you. Thank you.
Thank you. So today's possibly the final water supply update for this year, for October 12th, 2023. And change the... Okay. So for the SCRD water conservation regulations for this week or moving forward, Eastbourne will remain on stage 4. South Pender is going to be moved to stage 1, effective today or yesterday. And all other SCRD water systems they do not have any water conservation regulations. For Eastbourne, the demand has significantly reduced from the summer peak. The population is shifting to the full-time or winter residents. The well production continues to be very low. Significant well recharge is required prior to reducing the stages there. And we're hoping that upcoming rain and the less population will help recharge the aquifer. For South Pender, it's going to move to stage 1. Harris and McNeil Lakes are still filling. It's slower than what Chapman and Edwards had done. We need some more rain and time to recharge. The community demand has dropped by more than half, so maybe like 55% or something like that. We were seeing, almost 2,000 cubic meters a day being used, and now we're about 850, 900. However, given the time of the year and the weather forecast and the community use, we still need to have something, so we're just moving to stage 1. And it'll be required until the lake levels recharge significantly. So here's the graph of McNeil Lake level, and you can see, oh, I didn't realize my mouse was out there. You can see the blue line here, and the lake has come up. We're still down about just under 2 feet. So for water meter installations, we're going to start in the district of Seashelt, and it's expected to begin, well, we had a kickoff meeting yesterday, and we're going to start with inside installs first. The contractor is going to communicate directly with businesses that require inside installs and provide details and instructions on how to make the water meter installation appointment. For more information, you can visit the Let's Talk Water page. And for current information on the water supply and water conservation regulations, to visit scrd.ca. Water updates. It's a pretty short and sweet presentation this week. Well, there was one.
Thank you for the presentation. It's obvious that Director Inkster misses the charts that we were seeing so many of. So, directors, any questions on the water update today? Fairly straightforward. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I got 2 questions. The first one is the Harris, I'll call it the spillway, but whatever it is it closed now? Is Harris Lake refilling, or is it, with the spillway open, it would stay the 2 feet down, I guess? So just curious where that might be.
So last meeting, I had mentioned that we were going to try and make our way up to Harris Lake as well as Edwards and Chapman. We tried to make our way to Harris that day, and unfortunately, there's a lot of large trees that fell down through a storm, so we hadn't been able to get in to Harris Lake yet. But the last time the staff were there, we did block off a section of it so that it could recharge the lake, because we had gotten what we could out of the lake.
Thank you. I might drive down there this weekend.
Bring your chainsaw.
Just curious. Garden Bay Lake itself, it seems to be very, very slow in refilling. Is my observations correct? Is it slower than usual on refilling, or am I imagining things? It's a heck of a question. I don't know if you can answer it or not, but.
It is slowly refilling. As far as is it slower than previous years? I haven't compared that, but it is refilling. It is just much slower.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. It's I drive by it every day, and I can tell on the T-dock when the ramp is on the beach, so got my own little gauge. Thank you.
Director Inkster.
Thank you. I was in, and I know it's not on our water system, but it just reminded me of this water update. I was in Cliff Gilker a couple days ago, and the water flowing through there, it's not on our water system, it's quite heavy. I guess it's an indication to us of the amount of water that's moving to the ocean. And our need, as we move forward, to focus on more capture, because all this water is moving to the ocean. The question I had to you last time, and I guess I'll just have to do maybe some more research for myself, is the amount of water more quickly flowing into our lakes and our reservoirs with the amount of water that's fallen, i.e. the ground is now wet, and so the water is moving quicker into our systems? I asked about it last time about the recharge of our systems based on the amount of water that's coming off the mountainside, Mother Nature, right, how to collect water for us. Is that changed now? Are we seeing more flow quicker into the lakes? And I see a manager in behind, just to let you know, Chair, that also has a hand up on that answer. So I'd love to hear from two people. I'm okay with that.
You're generally asking about like the sponge effect of the watershed itself, just to clarify?
If that's what we'll call it.
Yeah.
The amount of recharge that we have once the water starts to land on the ground.
Okay. Who would like to take that question? GM Rosenboom.
Okay, let me start, Cody. Just add whatever you want. For all our systems, we don't have an extensive monitoring system or data on actually what's happening in the watershed. We don't have gauging systems in the upper watershed of the Chapman system, nor in the McNeil Lake watershed. So the only measure we have in terms of how quickly, how saturated the ground is just the rate of influx, the rate that the lake level is rising. So we don't know if it's coming from creeks or primarily groundwater, or in the spring snowmelt, or if it's the rain. So only know that it is recharging, and it is recharging faster than it was maybe 3 weeks ago, but actually what is driving that, we don't have the data. And as a result, and we also don't have any modeling to estimate what it could be as a result of, for example, a rain event or climate change, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, thank you for that. Directors, any other questions? I don't see any hands up. So thank you, Superintendent Abbott.
Thank
for the
you.
water update. All right. Moving on to Annex B in our agenda, item number 4, pages 8 to 10, is the Half Moon Bay Volunteer Fire Department Fire Hall number 2 service review and project update. And we will turn this over to GM Hall, I suppose.
Thank you, Chair, and happy Fire Prevention Week to everyone on the committee. So, as outlined in this report, concept level work on design for a replacement to Half Moon Bay Fire Department Hall number 2 has identified constraints associated with the site and the project delivery model, and revealed opportunities, or the importance of the opportunities, to consider long-range planning and service needs. This report recommends changing course on the project as currently structured, and proposals for the recommended changes would be brought to the 2024 budget process if the board directs that occurs. And I bring regrets from Fire Chief Ryan Daly. We do have Fire Chief Michael and Higgins with us today if there are fire-related questions on the report. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, GM Hall. Directors, any questions? Director McMahon.
Still getting used to the new mics. Actually, this is a very straightforward report. I mean, it seems very sensible to go back and review our needs and our situation, especially given what building costs are these days. it would be awful to drop a lot of money into a new hall and then discover that it wasn't adequate or it wasn't in the right place. So this seems like a very prudent, sensible way forward.
Thank you. Director Gabias.
Thank you, Chair, and I agree with Director McMahon. I think it's better to measure twice and cut once, as they say. So I'm happy to move the recommendations on page 8.
Thank you, and I have a seconder for that. Looking to speak? Okay, thank you. This is going to be voting all directors, because this is a single service participant. I don't see any other hands up except Director McMahon. So Director McMahon, go ahead.
Purely speculative. I had heard suggestions that maybe a new fire hall could be combined with some other purposes. Is that within the scope of the review?
Staff can offer a speculative answer, just to say that all options are on the table, and staff would be looking to maximize the value of any facility that would be developed for the community. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Gabias, I saw your hand up. No? Okay. Director Lee.
I must say it was a very complete report. It was tough reading. I had to print the acronyms and carry me forward while I looked through it, but it was very interesting. My question is, I see that we pay different people in different times in the various departments. Are we going to try and...
Director Lee, I think you've moved on to the next report. We're still
did
on
I?
Annex B.
Oh, I did, sorry.
That's
My
okay.
apologies. No wonder you're looking confused.
If you let me call the question, we can get to your question. So seeing no other hands up, I will call the question, voting all directors. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex C, Sunshine Coast Regional District Fire Department Compensation Review Results. GM Hall?
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to share progress on one of the items that was identified in the Fire Department Service Review that was undertaken in 2018-2019. So what's in front of you today is just an information report. It presents the results of a review of compensation in all of the SCRD fire departments. The project was led by Fire Chief Ryan Daly with support from all of the SCRD fire chiefs. And as I said a moment ago, unfortunately, Chief Daly wasn't able to attend today, but we do have Chiefs Michael and Higgins here as resources. In terms of next steps, staff are intending to bring forward a direction and options report to a future committee that could lead to consideration of adjustments to the compensation model used, since, as Director Lee noted, we do pay people differently across our different departments. And that would form part of the annual budget process. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Lee, did you want to try your question again, or?
No, I just got my answer.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Director Bax.
Yeah, thank you for the work. It's quite comprehensive. I have a couple questions. So, has the rank and file firefighters been consulted on this work? And can you explain the difference between paid on call and call out pay?
I am going to ask one of our fire chiefs to assist with that. You want to?
Oh, you're going to have to sit up there.
Want me to pull the chair up?
Yeah, that'd be great.
I don't want to push you around.
Thank you, Board. Paid on-call is a rate paid for emergency call-outs. As you know, currently firefighters are only paid for practices. So now you will get a a rate for emergency calls. We do have other rates, and I don't know if this really speaks to your question, but there's other rates for being on duty, which would be a portion of the rate that would be paid for an emergency call. Does that answer the question?
Well, I was wondering if paid on call means that it's like a firefighter sitting in the fire hall and waiting for a call, and if they are paid to wait. or
Okay,
if
well, that
they're
would,
paid Yeah, go ahead.
okay, thank you. That sort of speaks to what I was saying about duty crews and duty calls. So it's different from being paid for an emergency call. So you don't get paid as a regular firefighter if there's no call. You only get paid when the timer starts, when there's an emergency page.
Thank you, Chief. I understand the importance of this for retention of our valuable volunteers.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Yes, so there was a fair amount of discussion at UBCM about fire services across BC, volunteer fire services particularly being really stretched and challenged. And one of the issues that came up was not so much the pay, but the volume of calls, particularly medical calls. And I seem to remember a resolution asking the BC Ambulance Service to staff up better. Do you think that is there anything that we can do to reduce the volume of calls while not, reducing public safety, rather than the pay? Because it does become difficult on volunteers when there are frequent calls.
Through the chair here, I'm happy to take a shot at that. What we look at is, fire prevention efforts, as it is Fire Safety Week, in an attempt to reduce our calls, education, and things like that. We have a pretty good working relationship currently with our BC ambulance crew, where they're the primary first responders for medical calls. We just assist. So whether they need an extra set of hands, they're delayed, for whatever reason, if they want our help, we're happy to provide it. But we do let them be the primary responders there. We also advocate for staffing for BC ambulance crews. But I think the firefighters have a sense of duty in their own community to assist with any type of call that could come in requiring their skill set.
Thank you. Director Bax.
Yeah, speaking to what Director McMahon was talking about, and speaking from personal experience in the department in Roberts Creek, and I imagine it's probably quite similar in the Half Moon Bay department, that being first responders in a community where they're the only game in town, it weighs heavily on the volunteers. One of the reasons why I chose to take this position, one of the many reasons that I chose to take this position on the board and relinquish my duties as a firefighter, had to do with the medical calls as well. I think that if we could get BC Ambulance to step up their game and fund perhaps another ambulance station or another ambulance within my community, it would take a weight off of our volunteers. I know the medical calls are often weighty, you could say, and anything that we can do to maintain the health of our volunteers and to encourage them to stay on board and to train and to serve our community, I think is going to be a boon to the rest of to the Sunshine Coast in its entirety.
Thank you, Director. Director McMahon.
I appreciate this question. It's a little off topic, but it was mentioned that it's Fire Safety Week. Are there activities or educational programs taking place that the directors can share with the community?
Yes, thank you, Director McMahon. I can say again, thank you, that yes, there are events at Roberts Creek Fire Department in particular this Saturday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And the theme is cooking safety this year. So there will be some demonstrations to show what does or what can go wrong. So if you want to get that message out, you'd be a great help to us.
So cooking disaster demonstration.
We don't use the word disaster, madam. So
Sounds like a lot of fun, actually. I don't see any other hands up, so thank you very much for the report. I think we're all looking forward to the next steps as we move forward on this. So with that, we're going to move on to Annex D in our agenda package, which is snow removal and ice control equipment. And I see a couple of smiling faces there this morning. I think it's Manager Van Velzen. Go ahead.
Morning. Thank you, Chair. The provision of snow removal and ice control, also known as salting services, reduce the risk of injury to staff and the public and mitigates potential litigation due to slips and falls during periods of inclement winter weather. These services at the SCRD have previously been outsourced to contractors. Over the past few years, procurement of contractors to provide this service has been challenging, and our attempt to procure a contractor for the coming winter season was unsuccessful. Staff are seeking the board's approval for funding to procure the required equipment ahead of the winter season and 2024 budget to allow for the provision of snow removal and salting services through the 313 building maintenance function. A budget proposal for the ongoing operational budget will be presented at round one for the board's consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for that. I think you answered my question in the very last sentence there, in that does building maintenance have the capacity to do this work in addition to everything else that they do? So I don't know if you can answer that now or if that'll be part of the round one conversation.
We do have a small surplus in salaries and wages at this point that will allow us to provide the service for the remainder of this year, but that's the bulk of the proposal coming forward, is to ensure we have adequate resources.
Okay, thank you. Director McMahon, I see your hand up.
Thank you. So I appreciate that for this year, we're coming up on winter, so we need to do something right away. In the long term, is there any opportunity for the local governments to share this kind of service?
Thank you for the question. It's not really something we've looked at to this point.
It's usually, at least speaking from the District of Seashelt perspective, when the SCRD needs snow clearing done, the District of Seashelt needs snow clearing done too. And I know that, at least because we've got all our roads that we have to maintain, our public works staff will sometimes run all night keeping the roads clear. So I don't, it's certainly a conversation worth trying to have, but I don't know that, at least Seashelt has any capacity. Director White.
I did not see in the report, maybe I just was looking in the wrong place, but the estimate of savings on what we're usually incurring to the contractors. Like just even last year, I'm curious, what did we spend on contractors for this work?
Good question. Do we know that answer offhand?
Thank you for the question. I don't have that information offhand. Based on numbers I'm seeing, I don't anticipate we're going to see a lot of savings by bringing this internal versus using contractors.
Okay. We might have to follow up with the previous contract cost at a later date. Director Bax.
Yeah, I just want to commend staff on bringing this forward. I think this is a step in the right direction. We're going to have something that we can depend on in-house, that we don't have to worry that a contractor is going to be going elsewhere. I wanted to say that from my perspective, that this is a step in the right direction.
you like to move the recommendations then?
I would like to move the recommendations as they appear on page 54.
Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder for that? I do have a seconder. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm on the right one this time. I noticed that it's moving to building maintenance to do snow plowing, which means, do we have the existing skill sets in building maintenance to be operating equipment and snow plows and all that stuff? Doesn't seem like it's, the place, even though it's the right function. So I guess my question is, are we going to have to do training as well? Or do we have the existing skill sets?
Thank you for the question. We did do some salting last year to supplement the contracted services that we had for snow removal, but we do anticipate there will be some training required to move into doing snow removal internally.
Thank you. Sounds like a good job anyways. Looks like fun.
I think Director Lee would like to volunteer with building maintenance services over the winter
I can
here.
do that.
I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question on this. This is voting all directors. All those in favor? All right, and that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex E in our agenda, which is server replacements. And so this is Manager Nelson.
Thank you, Chair. This report seeks approval to refresh the SRD's core IT servers slightly ahead of our draft capital plan, which identified a 5-year refresh cycle scheduled for 2024. Staff recommend pursuing slightly accelerated replacement starting as soon as approved due to the need for more compute power to support expanded hybrid work environments. The current servers are over 4 years old and are not keeping up with these expanded demands. This is impacting staff productivity and with service interruptions and latency, and it is viewed as an urgent need that shouldn't wait until the 2024 budget cycle. The estimated cost is $302,000, and the funding is proposed at $157,000 from the remaining COVID-19 restart funds, which is a good fit for using those funds up before the end of 2023 as desired by the province, with the remainder $146,000 from capital reserves. This leaves $417,000 in IT capital reserves, which will be used for planned capital renewals, those projects coming forward as part of the 2024 budget plan.
Thank you very much. I don't see hands up yet, so I'll ask a quick question. The servers that we do use, are they purchased or leased?
They're purchased.
Okay, thank you. Director Lee.
Do we host all of our data on servers? Because everybody's kind of moving to the cloud servers now. So I was a little surprised to see servers here. They must be specialized or something like that.
Thank you for the question. Yes, we're in a long-range migration towards the cloud. In fact, we're already moving down that pathway already with our Office 365 licensing, which provides Outlook services and various Microsoft applications in the cloud, as well as we've just embarked on a SharePoint migration, which will move us from content server, our legacy EDMRS solution, to the cloud. So that data is already moving to the cloud, and we have a plan to further move to the cloud as and when it makes sense in the future.
Thank you. So these servers are probably good for another 4 or 5 years then we'll go from there.
Yes, our draft capital plan identifies a 5-year refresh cycle.
Thank you. Director Bax.
But the cloud is actually somebody else's server, isn't it not? Is it another computer somewhere else? So do we have backup here at our own facilities to, should there be any interruption between access to the cloud and our computer system? I would imagine we'd have backup within these new servers that we're buying. Is that so?
Yes, thank you for the question. And to clarify, these are on-prem services, so they will be on-premise in our IT building where they'll be located. And there is redundancy that is part of that. And we also have backup and recovery processes as part of our business continuity strategy.
Thank you. Director McMahon?
Yes, sounds good to me. I would like to move the recommendations on page 57.
Thank you, and I have a seconder for that. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. This is voting all directors. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. All right, moving on to Annex F in our agenda, item number 8, the Infrastructure Q2 Department Report, pages 59 to 76. And I will turn this over to our General Manager of Infrastructure, Mr. Rosenboom. It's good to see you. We missed you. Well, most of us missed you last meeting because we weren't here, so it's good to see you again.
Thank you. Thank you for your welcome. And I'm here together with Mr. Brown to answer any questions about the Q2 quarterly report. We recognize that it would have been preferred to have this to you earlier, but due to circumstances, that was not possible. So we're happy to answer any questions that you have about any of the initiatives listed in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I assume given the date that we're seeing this, we're going to see the Q3 report probably before too long, hey?
Before Christmas.
Thank you. Directors, any questions on the report? Director McMahon?
Yes, I'm looking forward to the Q3 report because the after summer one is usually the most fun. We've been seeing some just excellent graphs and charts in the water updates. And I would be interested in maybe if you've produced them anyway, if they might be included. Things like the refill of Chapman Lake, really interesting material. So just curious if you could throw a few of those in there for decoration. Thank you.
Thank you, Director McMahon. I think the GM heard that you would like more decoration in your reports. Director Gabias.
Thank you, Chair. Question about the Square Bay wastewater plant infiltration, the collection system, which needs some repairs. Is there anything that staff can tell us about the status of those repairs and like the study that was recently funded? Anything new?
Thank you for your question. As far as I know, but I have to check in with staff on that as well. As far as I know, due to other priorities, there is still work to be done there, and there's still a lot of work to be done there on the collection system, and we just haven't got to addressing it all yet. But I will provide more information on that in the Q3 report, which will come actually next month, not before Christmas.
Thank you. Director Stanford.
Yes, thank you. I welcome the reference to the Langdale wastewater plans. I was hoping to see the successful announcement of the grant, but I didn't see anywhere what the actual amount of the grant was, and that's on page 62. Also, when are we going to find out more about the details on the work to the Langdale wastewater replacement project? Through the chair.
Thank you for the question. From top of mind, I think the grant was in the order of magnitude of $750,000. And we'll make sure that in the next report there will be a little bit more detail about next steps. Thank you.
Thank you. Director White.
Yeah, speaking of charts, I really found the charts that are in this report to be fascinating. And that's these charts about this year's water usage compared to the average of the last 5 years. And there's a lot that could be discussed there and considered. And I'm wondering if we're doing any kind of follow-up policy analysis on this when we consider encouraging people to conserve, because there's just like what I find fascinating is generally, the rain that we're getting definitely influences water usage in the summer, but we know that's generally the same right across the Sunshine Coast, and yet in different water systems we see varying behaviors. If we look at Chapman, it's pretty close to the average of usage, where looking at other systems, it really shot up in like considerably in some cases in May of this year. And that's based on basically the same rainfall coast-wide. So it leads me to wonder if, this is kind of a conservation cultural element of these different areas, particularly when I think about the fact the Pender water systems have not been as used to being put on water restrictions in past years as Chapman has. So I wonder if that's a factor. I don't know what's going on in Eastbourne. That's really interesting that there were huge water usage in January and February. That's a whole other question that has probably been answered in previous reports, but I'm seeing it now graphically. It's leading me to ask about that again. I wonder if these were leaks or something. But I could go on and on about digging into these graphs, but I'm interested if there's any kind of analysis being done, and especially in consideration of potential, because there's huge savings that could be accomplished here if we kind of hope that everyone sticks to the average in some of these water systems where you can see in the North Pender, South Pender, especially, that's a considerable difference that would have had an impact this summer.
GM Rosenboom.
Thank you. Thanks for this remark, Director White. First of all, May and June were relatively dry compared to the last several years, and there was not a lot of rain in those months. And how every water system responds to how the residents and the user in general respond to those systems, to those circumstances, differs significantly between the water systems. In Eastbourne, they know it will be dry this summer, so they just buckle up and conserve water, and that's what you see. In other systems, as you indicate, like North and South Pender, they are less used to having drought-related impact to their water supply. So the initial response to dry weather is there more of business as usual, and there's less an effort there to conserve water in general. This is really a general highlight. So yes, we're looking at these graphs and identifying where areas are that we could do more education, more outreach, more awareness at different times of the year. But climate is a huge factor there. And with respect to the Eastbourne January use, yes, there was a leak that was fixed in February, hence the drop in February.
Thanks.
Thank you. Director Bax.
Pertaining to that, I had some rather spirited conversations over the Thanksgiving dinner about our water usage, and I'd like to see how we compare to the rest of the country and the rest of the world, because I don't think we're doing very well. I wanted to look at the chart on page 72 about the landfill, the chart, just for clarity, this chart shows the tonnage deposited at the Seashell landfill. The 2021, 2022 are full years, and the 2023 is a half a year. Is that correct? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I see that. The words seem to be right on target. Is there any news about the Seashell landfill? It's how much life is left in it, and what we're doing to try to extend that life, or is there any update in this portfolio?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. I think in May, report was, or in early this year in Q2 at least, there was a report presented to the board that indicated that the current estimated lifespan is until early 2026. And hopefully, we're hoping that by the end of next month, at the second COW meeting, there will be a presentation to the board by our consultant on what we have done to further explore long-term options. If not late next month, it will be early December. It will be the December meeting, but we're finalizing it at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Before Christmas. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually on top page 2, but it's the Garden Bay Water Treatment Upgrade Feasibility Study Phase 2. My question is, will we be getting a report on options for next steps so that we have a chance to get it in the next year's budget? Is that the plan?
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, there will be a report on that to come in somewhere in the upcoming meetings as well.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
Yes, believe it or not, I have twice been asked recently when we are going to update our 2013 comprehensive water plan. So do we have a target for that?
Staff have started working last year in 2022 on an update to our water strategy. The high-level strategy on what we're aiming to do, and we're intending to finalize that later this year and bring it to the board, maybe in December, but most likely in January for their consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. And Director White.
Yeah, just a couple more questions on the solid waste end here. Textile recycling, could we be reminded why Pender Harbor and Seashell have the transfer station and the landfill are in this program, and how it works with the Gibson's Recycling Depot having, I guess, its own program? Like, I think the contractor must have arranged that themselves. And I don't know if, I forget if it's Diabetes Canada. But I'm just seeking some clarity on that and why we don't just have the program coast-wide.
Thank you for the question. The SRD has only implemented this program for the two facilities it owns and operates itself, which are the Pender Harbor Transfer Station and the Seashell landfill. Any other recycling station like Grips in Pender or Salish or anywhere else on the coast, anybody can have their own agreement with Diabetes Canada. But for example, Diabetes Canada also, SRD and Diabetes Canada also are working together on having these bins at the fire halls. So it's not only landfills.
Okay. Thanks.
And I know that at least Salish Soils already has one of these bins as well. So they're quite widespread. Yeah. I don't see any other hands up, and this report is just for information. I think we've all got our questions answered this month or this quarter. So thank you very much for that, GM Rosenboom and Acting GM Brown. And we're going to move on to Annex G, Water Supply Advisory Committee minutes. They're there. We've already received them. Directors, if you had any questions or comments, now would be the time. Not seeing any hands. We don't have any communications. We don't have any new business. We don't have an in-camera session. So I look for a motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded. All those in favor? And that's carried. Do we have any questions from our online attendees? I don't see any hands up, so thank you very much. And we will see you at the board meeting at 1:30. Bye, everybody.